CBS News Colorado celebrates Asian American Pacific Islanders by taking a journey through their lost history. I'm Brian Flores here at Comanche Crossing in Strasburg, where the last spike was driven into the first continuous transcontinental railroad. Just one of many contributions Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have made to our country's history, infrastructure, and culture. But many times those contributions have been overlooked or forgotten. So we are shedding a light on a lost history here in Colorado. The building of the Transcontinental Railroad was critical to trade, expansion, and development in the U.S. Without it, you would have to take the 6-month route around Cape Horn at the tip of South America just to get from the East Coast to the West Coast. Chinese workers were recruited by Central Pacific for this very dangerous work of building the tracks, eventually making up 90% of the labor force for the railroad. After it was finished in 1869, many Chinese immigrants settled here in Colorado, looking for gold. The Colorado Tribune announced the arrival of the first Chinese immigrant on June 29, 1869, saying he's come, the first John Chinaman in Denver. Unfortunately, that name stuck for many Chinese immigrants who made Colorado home, including Chin Lin Su. He immigrated to California in 1853 from a wealthy family in China and was fluent in Chinese and English. After recruiting Chinese laborers to help build the railroad, he set his sights on Colorado.
Because he heard there was gold here, they thought they could come here and just pick it up off the streets. And they were wrong.
Lin Su's great-great-granddaughter, Linda Ju, says in 1870 he settled in Blackhawk to mine gold and silver.
They wouldn't allow him to stake any claims because he was Chinese and claimed he was not a citizen.
He would pan for gold since he didn't have the equipment to mine, but eventually he managed more than 300 Chinese miners. He became well known and respected. Chin Lin Su was so successful, he was honored with a dedicated chair at the Central City Opera House and eventually a stained glass window at the state capitol. But the image of him is offensive.
When we saw the stained glass, they had him in a Mandarin collar Chinese outfit. He never wore clothes like that. He always wore Western suits.
There was much success for Chin Lin Su and others in mining and businesses, but soon an effort started to drive Chinese laborers out.
Whenever the country suffered from an economic dislocation, or what we refer to as depressions, recessions, that sort of thing, they looked for individuals to blame. And naturally, they would blame those that they thought were the source of the problem, and this included Chinese workers who, well, as far as they were concerned, worked too hard for too little.
In places like Nederland and Leadville, the Chinese were warned to not come, and those communities took pride in driving them out.
They referred to them basically as representative of this group of people who would later be considered an invasive species in Colorado. And like other invasive species, they would eventually be, well, unfortunately, rooted out.
That's exactly what happened here in Denver. Now, this area we now know as Lodo, but back in the 1870s, between 15th and 17th Streets along Wazee, this was the core of Denver's historic Chinatown. This was also the site of a riot that would burn it down. Denver's Chinatown was called Hop Alley, an offensive nod to the rise in opium use blamed on the Chinese.
You get the impression that all Chinese were hopheads or drug addicts. The Chinese were, in many ways, the victims of opium rather than the promoters of opium.
On October 31st, 1880, some Chinese residents were playing pool at John's Saloon in Denver.
A group of drunken white laborers came in and started a fight with them. And that fight escalated into a riot. Approximately a quarter of Denver's population descended upon Denver's Chinatown on October 31st, 1880, where they raped and pillaged and nearly destroyed the community.
It was a racially motivated riot and one designed to drive Chinese residents out, but the plan backfired.
Some left, of course, but the Chinese remained because it was home.
and they started to rebuild. But just 2 years after the riot, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 kept more Chinese laborers out of the country.
That, combined with the anti-miscegenation laws, meant that the Chinese could not bring their families over. They could not establish families here.
The number of Chinese residents would naturally dwindle, and as more were leaving the state, even the country, that would open the door for more Japanese immigrants to enter. That shift in lost history when we return. The first big wave of Japanese immigrants to Colorado began in the early 20th century. They worked in the mines, on railroads, farms, and started their own businesses. But the racism the Chinese dealt with would plague the Japanese as well, and it would uproot so many lives during World War II. Here in Denver Sakura Square, which was once named Little Tokyo, there are statues honoring the leaders of the Japanese community. Among them is Governor Ralph Carr. Many of the Japanese who arrived here back in the 1940s did so because Governor Carr told them they were welcome. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, fears of Japanese in the United States grew, prompting the removal of Japanese from their homes to concentration camps, or what the government called internment camps, like Camp Amachi in southeastern Colorado. More than 7,000 Japanese Americans, U.S. citizens, taken to Camp Amachi lost their homes and businesses as a result. But it was Carr who stood up to Japanese American racism.
It was, un-American to be doing this. But nevertheless, it was a period of time in which most other leaders, and that includes his fellow governors in the West, turned their backs on their fellow citizens.
And that led to some Japanese thriving here in Colorado, including one man who opened this store back in 1944. The Pacific Mercantile Exchange here in 19th and Larimer, and its owners from then to now play a role in the lost history of Colorado. It's a typical weekday at Pacific Mercantile Exchange. Product needs to be stocked for customers. The store has come a long way since its meager opening in 1944, but in many ways, it remains the same.
To this day, we still carry eggs, bread, detergent.
Jolie Noguchi, along with her brothers, currently own the store. They are third generation or sanseis. Jolie's daughter, Alyssa, is the store's bookkeeper and is next in line for running the store. All continuing the work, success, and struggles of their grandfather, George Anai.
The reason why he chose Colorado was because of literally Governor Carr opening up the state, no questions asked, to the Japanese Americans.
And that's the reason why Anai came to Colorado in the first place. Originally, George had a store in Sacramento, California in the 1930s, but as anti-Japanese sentiment grew,
And during that war, was taken away, and they were only able to take what they could carry.
when Governor Carr opened the door for Japanese, George walked right in. George wanted to name it Nippon Market, but because Japanese and American tensions were high at the time, the governor told him to rethink that name.
He thought about it and thought he came from the Pacific Coast. So that's how Pacific Mercantile, the name came about, and so the name in itself has history.
Becoming considered the first Asian market in Colorado. It wasn't always easy, though.
Being Japanese American, they said, why are you here? You don't belong here. You need to go back to Japan.
But just like her grandfather,
So would you like to try this one?
each day is an opportunity to show her culture, to be there for others.
I am American. I am Japanese American. And so I belong here too.
Not going anywhere. What the future holds, however, falls on Alyssa Noguchi. With a dwindling Japanese population here in Denver, Alyssa's focus is clear.
For me, the biggest takeaway from the store is not losing the history, not only of us as our family, but also as Japanese Americans and the internment camp and the incarceration of Japanese Americans. I don't want that history to be lost.
Of course, times have changed since the store first opened. The owners are talking about expanding or perhaps moving the store to a different location. But one thing that will not change is the store's motto, and that's the customer is always right. And that's not the only success story born from a longing for home. How that longing is keeping another community's lost history alive. Cruise down South Federal here in Denver and you'll see several Vietnamese businesses, but the Far East Center stands apart from the rest. It's been here for more than 30 years, but not many people know the history behind it. And many people may not know it's a gathering place for those missing home. It's been a long time coming. The Far East Center in Denver finally getting a historic landmark designation earlier this year.
Everybody come to step in Far East Center. They know this land, this area, turn out is landmark. It's a history.
It's a history that started in Vietnam. When Saigon fell to North Vietnam on April 30th, 1975, many Vietnamese fled South Vietnam and nearly 1 million refugees would arrive in the United States.
That time we don't know what's going on. We just try to save our life, to run away.
Ton Luong was 25 and a high school teacher when he fled, with just $10 in his pocket.
We got big trouble if we stay in Vietnam.
Vietnamese refugees needed sponsors to come to the U.S. As soon as Ton got to Colorado, he started working, first as a busboy at Top of the Rockies, then at King Soopers doing maintenance and stocking overnight. He was settling into a new life, but missed everything about his old country, especially the food.
We saw a lot of Vietnamese people, they missing them hometown. So they missing the food, they missing to see each other. They want to come to see, to remember who we are.
Ton and his brother opened an Asian grocery store, then a restaurant, and eventually a small mall with different shops. They eventually bought the land on the corner of Federal and Alameda in 1988 and named it the Far East Center.
We want to everybody come by. It's not even Vietnamese people. We want all Asian people come all together.
His wife Phung Luong escaped Vietnam when she was 18. Her family of 10 took a boat from Vietnam to Hong Kong.
We didn't take anything. We just don't know where we go.
They only had 9 square feet on the ship for their big family. It took 5 days to sail to Hong Kong, but the ship, Hue Phuong, was never allowed to dock, stranding them on board for a month.
Everybody on the ship, just a whole SOS rescue. We need what? Blankets and food. And they use a helicopter. They bring in the blanket. Every day we eat cracker. They only bring in cracker for us.
They were eventually allowed on land and taken to refugee camps. Phung came to the U.S. in 1980, and when she met her American sponsor, she fainted.
They rescue me, but I hear everything. And I open my eye, I say, thanks, I'm survived.
She soon met Ton and married him 6 months later. He already owned his businesses, and in 1983, she wanted her own. Phung started a video store renting Asian language films and then transformed it into a gift shop that's still popular today. It's called Trung An, which means longevity and peace, a fitting name in a place that provides both for the community it serves.
If you win lotto, you win lotto. You happy today, tomorrow, it's same. But this is different, no? This is forever, for next generation and next generation.
And because of its historic designation, the Far East Center will last for generations. Well, coming up, another cultural center across town is very important for the Filipino community and is a gathering place to celebrate my history. Welcome back to Lost History. Well, this next group is very close to my heart. After all, it is a part of who I am. Behind me is the Filipino American Community of Colorado Cultural Center here in Edgewater. Anywhere between 13 to 20,000 Filipinos and Filipino Americans currently live in the Centennial State, including myself. When they got here, however, that history unfortunately remains unclear. Now, there is a stereotype within the community that Filipino men who come to America join the military, while the women become nurses. These are my cousins, Almond and Eric, who arrived from the Philippines in the 1990s. Almond is a veteran of the Air Force, and Eric is an Army veteran. And my grandma's sister was a nurse for many years. There were many paths for Filipinos arriving in Colorado. While many arrive based on that stereotype, what we're seeing, especially with the younger generations, is that that stereotype doesn't fit anymore. It's not easy to do. It's called binasuan, or a Philippine folk dance, something Jason Charles de Vera does well within a community that feels like home.
It's nice to feel recognized.
Finding that sense of community for Jason is something he lost since moving to Colorado from California recently.
Everywhere I went, I would always feel like, oh, I'm the only Filipino person in here, or the only Asian person in this area.
That community is at the Filipino American Community of Colorado, or FACC.
You come together, find a place. Nobody gonna tell you what to do. You just already know.
Like a family, FACC has been in Colorado since 1954. Now, of course, during that time, there were less Filipinos than now, which is why it was important to build that community then.
The only way that they can kind of survive and try to assimilate in their new land is to find other Filipinos going through the same thing.
The first Filipinos to ever step foot in what is now the U.S. dates back to 1587 in Morro Bay, California, when they came aboard as crew members on board Spanish ships. One of the first Filipino settlements happened in 1763, when the Filipino sailors, known as Manila men, grew tired of Spanish abuse aboard their ships. They left and started what was the first Filipino settlement called St. Malo in Louisiana. It remains unclear, however, when Filipinos arrived here in Colorado.
Talking to some of the older folks, military. You know, it was a way. My dad came the same way through the military, and that's how a lot of people found their way here to Colorado.
And throughout the years.
Nursing is one way, working for tourism industry, the hotels.
There are 5 Filipino groups here in Colorado. Thousands live in the Centennial State, and it continues to grow and thrive.
At the end, we're all immigrants to the United States, and to learn different cultures, to learn different values, to learn how family is different across different countries, you know, we all can learn from that.
The history of Asian Americans here in Colorado extends even further. The state has seen an increase in Asians coming in from India as well as other Southeast Asian countries. Our hope, though, is that we shared a broader picture of our state and shined a light on a lost history.